myself, who has participated in many of them. This is a special one. We call it a sprint. It's 45 days and it's a fiscal session. So to make it very, very simple, on April 8th we start. On June 6th at 6:01 p.m. it's history. And then we'll all talk about what we did, what we didn't do, what we did right, what we did wrong. It is a money session again. It's all about the budget. And that's going to be a key to what we talk about today. Also, for Al, I think everyone in the public should be concerned, it's also about 900 bills that have already been pre-filed. Which means as we're looking at a budget, as all citizens are trying to figure out what kind of life we're going to have in Louisiana with a $1.3 or so billion shortfall, we're also going to be looking at 900 bills, and that means 45 days. And we do live on planet Earth, and if there are 24-hour days, so you do the math. How does government do what it needs to do in that period of time? So that sets up my little context of what I call the impossibility of the session. The impossibility of the session dealing with a $1 billion shortfall, again, because this is not the first shortfall, it's been a continuation for the last 5 cycles that we've been cutting from the budget. And probably, in the same, if the sequence continues, that'll be followed by mid-year budget cuts, which affect services, which I'll talk about later. And it all is based upon the idea in Louisiana that's been prevalent for some time, or philosophy, that we can do more with less. And then I'm here also to tell you that we patently reject that philosophy. We believe it's basically a lie to the people. So in order for me to discuss the 2013 session, I have to tell you that the 2012 session still lives and breathes and litigates. So you can't put that to bed, which isn't to bed yet. So I have to at least tell you a little bit about that before we touch 2013. But I'd like to start with the message to the governor. I know the governor was here yesterday. The governor was in Lake Charles. We were in Lake Charles. The governor was there. The governor was in Rapides. We were in Rapides. So this is the message to the governor. It's very simple. And it's the message to the legislature. With respect to the 2012 session, which is supposed to be the past, and what we can learn from the 2012 session that can help us perhaps in 2013. Good law is born of fair, open, and deliberate process. It's inclusive, meaning it involves all of us. It brings good people together for something that my parents used to refer to as the common good. That's what we're supposed to be legislating about. Good law cannot be made clandestinely. Good law cannot be made without a guiding respect for the Constitution. That puts 2012 right brightly into focus, and by that I mean is this. That is not what happened last session. And in the last session, as it was post-mortem by the major newspaper in June, it was summarized that last session could be characterized in 3 words. What a mess. That's what the editorial was written in a major newspaper. They went on to say that the governor and his allies had played fast and loose with the legislative process, cramming through poorly drafted bills. Shortcuts were the order of the day, right up until the MFP fight on the last legislative day. Continue with that thought. That newspaper then led to a number of other editorials. One editorial writing about the voucher plan that came out of the session said it was much like engineers going up into an airplane at 30,000 feet to build it. Another editorial referred to the evaluation plan that had been launched in Louisiana as product of both Acts 1 and 2, tied to those, as bordering on immoral. So I say all that because we ended up in court in June with 2 major constitutional challenges of the governor's acts, Acts 1 and 2. Now I want to say very, very clearly, the governor and others have made statements that we were agents of the status quo. I like to call out the words that are used. I don't have a problem with that title. If that means an agent of the status quo is a leader or a citizen even that decides that they want to stand for principle of law, for the Constitution. If that's status quo, then we embrace it. We don't embrace it if the accusation is we are status quo because we challenged and we dared to question. And to that, quickly a summary on those acts. Act 2 was ruled unconstitutional in regard to the use of MFP funds for vouchers, for school vouchers. The state had appealed to the Supreme Court. We had oral arguments recently in that case. We all await that case, and I know recently, I think in this marketplace, there was a report about the Indiana case. The relevance of the Indiana case is none. Our complaint was relative to the Louisiana Constitution. The exception we took, which was we were judged to be correct in district court, was it was unconstitutional in use of the MFP funds to pay for school vouchers. Act 1 was ruled unconstitutionally ultimately in district court in its entirety. That bill was referred to as the tenure bill. The bill wasn't a tenure bill. The bill was a multitude of bills, and the judge ruled it unconstitutional because it violated the constitutional prohibitions on multi-packaging bills, putting multiple intents, multiple purposes into one bill. Now, I've heard the Department of Education, I've heard the governor, I've heard others say, we won a lawsuit on a technicality. That's not a technicality. The reason that constitutional prohibition exists is to give a bill an opportunity to be clearly debated, to citizens to be informed about what's in legislation, and legislators be allowed to vote on each aspect of it. So, once again, as the judge stated in the trial, a conservative juror stated, if they wanted to change the Constitution, there's a way to do it. And that's what should have happened. So, in both cases, as an organization, we felt vindicated by the judgments in the case. Reasonable people concluded there was cause for action. So, moving beyond the lawsuits and moving into the context of the 2013 session, which is going to be here before we even know it, we're simply saying to the governor and the legislature, we can't have another one like that. Not if Louisiana is going to move forward. If Louisiana is going to move forward, we can't have a session that's marked by contention and characterized by shortcuts. It creates a disrespect for government itself. The legitimacy of the process is important to the respect for the law. So no to that and move to 2013. It can end well if we're included to be at the table, teachers and school employees. Chaos is already enough. There is enough chaos as a result of what happened last year. I want to back up those words by just reminding folks that teachers are retiring and exiting the profession. There's a 27% spike according to the teacher retirement system, and a number of teachers that have left this year as compared to last year. In some districts, such as Lafayette, it's been reported that the number of teachers resigning is 4 times higher than it was last year. And as my email fills up with comments from teachers basically saying enough is enough. The piling on is too much. Stop it. Respect us is the general message. So with the exodus, as I said, I would back up, and I had a survey to show you, but I'll just cite it. It's in your packets. We did a question, since there were those that were saying that teachers were very supportive of the reforms, and particularly the evaluation revisions, and respectful of what was going on. So we did an online survey. 98% of the respondents, almost 7,000 teachers, said no. They don't respect it. They don't feel it's credible. And they are offended by it. 2%, 168 respondents, said they support it. So I think the book is in on that, which means the heart of the session in regard to what is last year's business, 2012, is to fix and repair those things that were broken in the last session. So I want to be really clear what I'm saying here. We shouldn't be dealing with last year's business. We should be dealing only with the fiscal issues. That's what should be on the table. But because the factory, being what happened, being government, being the factory, using that metaphor, broke these laws, now they're forced to fix them. So pleased to tell you that we have over a count right now of some 17 pieces of legislation intended to fix what was broken in 2012 in regard to education law. From tenure, bills to make that a fair process again, to bring teachers to the table, to the issue of evaluation and making sure that it's a complete, fair process, to how we decide to hold the charter schools and the voucher schools accountable. And it's in your packets also, but there is a list of legislation, and coming right out of Cato, just to improve the lives and recognize the fact that there are young people in the classrooms. There's a very good piece of legislation that's very practical that allows nursing mothers the opportunity to take care of that child, that infant, be a good mom, and not leave the profession. And that's a really important piece of legislation. That's the kind of legislation that I think we could all work together to make our schools better and give parents a better opportunity. However, I also want to say within this construct of looking at what's broken, the governor has also doubled down on the old policies that were built by the factory incorrectly in Act 1 and Act 2. And there is a smorgasbord of those bills that are just simply reasserting the same ideas that were there last time. But because I'm a hopeful, cheery person, I look at even the resubmission of those laws as an opportunity, because government out in politics, it does proceed in strange ways, an opportunity to have the dialogue we didn't have last year. So when the governor resubmits the tenure proposals that were contained in Act 1 in the exact same position they were last year, Louisiana Federation of Teachers says that's because the governor wants to talk. And we want to talk too, because we're not opposed to tenure reform. There are better ways to do things, better ways to build a mousetrap. We're just opposed to unfair practices, unfair and inconsistent rules, and unfair processes that produce them. So that's the challenge. Now, to the governor's tax plan. Why would we weigh in? Because everything we do is about money. If we don't have the money to fund education, you get what you pay for in the world. Louisiana has said it for a long time, they want a world-class education. They never define what that has meant. If you want something that's world-class, shouldn't you also have to tell us how much it costs to do that and what it looks like? It becomes three blind men, the old joke, looking at an elephant, right? If you really don't know what it looks like, how can you purchase it? So to the governor's tax plan, we say this: we don't stand alone. We have joined a group, and it was formed 2 years ago, called Better Choices for a Better Louisiana, which consists of 40 other organizations. They're faith-based, they're health providers and concerned citizens, but it is a cross-section. And the idea was to build something bigger than ourselves, because it's not just about our interest here, it's about the interest of a better community for everyone, and we take that very seriously. What our first message to the governor on the budget is this: we need a balanced, transparent approach to solving our fiscal crisis, and I feel almost like I am a broken record saying this, not short-sighted cuts to services and on the backs of people. Our universities are being devastated. We're losing talent. Our children are going elsewhere. Our population is increasing in the areas of the most needy of our citizens. Those that are young and able and mobile are finding a way to the gates. So we need a balanced approach. It's not about cutting to the bottom. This cannot be the bottom basement retail outlet that sells secondhand goods. We ought to be striving for something better. We've all known people leaving the state and moving to states that are supposedly higher taxed than ours. They're not leaving because of the taxes. They're leaving because of quality of life. We oppose the governor's elimination of the state income tax and the corporate tax. Flat out oppose it. It's a bad idea. I'm not mincing words, and we don't have the money to run Louisiana Believes commercials. But that's what it is. The swap, it's not a fair swap, because it means the swap then has to be an increase on sales tax. If you increase the sales taxes, if you're heard in the dialogue in the communities, you're doubling into double digits, you affect the ability of local school systems, local municipalities to raise their revenues at the local level, because people then become taxed out. So it affects when government at the state level isn't going to provide the money to the locals because they're cutting, and they can't raise it because government's raised the state sales tax. It doesn't work. And it is also more, I hate to be a traditionalist, but it's unfair to the individuals in the middle class and in the lower rungs of the income spectrum because they pay a heavier burden percentage of their income. We do support the idea of collection of sales tax online. We do support the increase in cigarette taxes. We're fearful it's not going to produce the kind of revenues that's being discussed, but we think it's a good idea just for the idea of the health of our citizens. Now, this is one that I want also to stop and pause, because you'd say, why is it our business as an education organization? We support the expansion of Medicaid, and we think the governor ought to get off the dime on this. That means, to us, we teach the children that don't get the health care. So if you want to connect the dots, a child isn't well, a child doesn't learn. So I don't care how many standardized tests they design, if you don't give that child that, the rest is impossible. And then if you're only interested in the business end of the proposition, reports indicate that Louisiana will generate $15.8 billion of new revenues, job creation in the health fields by acceptance of the Medicaid expansion. So to the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, that's a no-brainer. Now remember, my speech won't go on for 45 days or 45 minutes, but I will tell you that it's a 45-day session. The next piece is the Minimum Foundation Program. 5 years this will be of a frozen MFP. That means for 5 years, school districts all over the state of Louisiana lost about $500 million in revenues as costs have gone up, as teachers have been furloughed, as salaries have been frozen, as conditions in the classrooms have worsened. This will be year number 5. So Louisiana Federation of Teachers stands with two other groups so far, being Louisiana School Board Association and the Superintendent's Association, urging the legislature to reject the Minimum Foundation Program and revert back to the 2011 one. The second reason that we are opposed to the MFP in its present posture is it includes school vouchers. The judge has ruled. We are in the Supreme Court, but we have an MFP now that reinserts, for the sake of argument, why do we want another contentious fight? As the judge said in district court, you could have funded vouchers, you didn't have to violate your Constitution. You could have gone line item. Why? Because we want to have a fight? I don't know. We also are very concerned with the effect of the MFP on special needs children. It's going to reduce funding for those of greatest need and those at the gifted spectrum. You speak with those parents, they will tell you more about how that will affect their children. In continuing, and this will close very quickly now, testing. I had my button and it fell off. Learning's more than a test score, okay? That's our mantra here. It is. What we're saying to the legislature and to the governor is get a grip and don't be hypocrites. And I'm going to say that, and I can say it, I think I can say it because it's logical. Why I say don't be hypocrites is we're spending $22 million annually to test children in public schools. At least $22 million. And we got to get to the bottom, and our proposition is we're working on an HCR, a House Concurrent Resolution, to force Bessie to tell us actually how much money is being spent of our tax dollars that are being exported to primarily two entities that are out of state, one in Minnesota, one in California. But here's the hypocrisy. When the opportunity was there to be true policymakers, if the governor and the allies of the governor believed strongly in incentivize private education, to incentivize it and to move children away from public education, then they should have taken those wonderful things like standardized tests with them. The governor absolutely refused to include standardized testing as a measure of the school's performance. It applies to the public schools to condemn public schools in regard to where they A, B, C, D's, or F's, but we have no A, B, C, D, F in regard to the schools that have been chosen by government and to use the public tax money. That's hypocrisy. I would like to see that we copy the private and parochial schools and de-emphasize the test. If that is truly the position of government, then let's be sincere about this. You can't hold it. I don't even think I have to beat the dead horse. It's not a logical proposal. In Indiana, it was supposedly done with accountability on both sides. Why didn't we do that way in Louisiana? We all have our theories. I'll keep mine to myself. On retirement, we have a bevy of bills once again being filed to reform retirement. The issue for us is very simple. Retirement's earned, and everyone should earn retirement. You shouldn't have to work to your grave, and it shouldn't be about public sector versus private sector. Whether you work for the private company or you work for government, at the end of your working life, you should be able to live without being a burden on your family. You should be able to live with some dignity. There are bills that have been filed, and we're doing an analysis of them right now, that driven by the unfunded accrued liability in the retirement systems, which the employees are not responsible for. Once again, government needs short sessions that have more to do than they can handle, are once again going to try to penalize our employees. So that will be a battle. And I'll close with the last one. And this one is, whether you expected this or not, I'm putting it out there. A legislator from this area has filed a very offensive bill in the context of what I think of peace and harmony. And that's HB 552. And that bill is meant to take away from public employees the right to have their membership dues to an organization like the LFT or any other voluntarily taken out of their payroll checks. Along with the pots and pans and insurances and all the other vendors, 552, Representative Seabog, wants to take that away. There is no reason, in fact I read an article this morning online where someone argued, well, that would be great, we'll bring a little bit of Wisconsin to Louisiana. Well, if that is the goal, to create a fraction amongst people, an argument in a state that needs fewer arguments and more working together for sure, because we're a state that's struggling and continues to struggle in poverty, that we're going to pick the fight of eliminating the employee's right to make a choice, reminding you all this is a right to work state. We have about as much in common with Wisconsin and Michigan as Louisiana does with Mars. It's ridiculous. But there's a fight that's someone to be had, and we're taking it very seriously. Because at the end of this little crazy rainbow with this issue is the fact there are people out there, an extreme fraction of the group called Louisiana Association for Business and Industry, call it as it is, not everybody in the group, but an extreme faction that didn't like the positions we took on Acts 1 and 2. It's that simple. They didn't like the fact that the teachers spoke out and we went to court. So we did. And so the penalty for that is we take away your authority or your right or your ability to have people voluntarily join your organization through their payroll check. That's very simple. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. We don't have mandatory collective bargaining. This isn't the Rust Belt. This isn't Wisconsin. So that is going to be an unnecessary fight that, again, has people wringing of their hands and picking sides in the war of the words of the status quo, in the union boss. All of those little things will be out there. There's a nice little picture of me on the internet now saying, fears change. Beautiful little shot of me. My wife sent it to me this morning. She thought it was a great shot. But it's all low politics. It's silly. It's really silly when there's so much in front of us. That's it for the Louisiana Federation of Teachers press conference. Any questions? Jackie, would you like to add anything?
If I could.
Sure. On the local side, Jackie is all yours.
That's fine. I'm very, very proud and honored to be a part of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers. We are a very principled, a very idealistic, we are an organization that believes in good government. And part and parcel to that is we believe that we have a obligation, a promise to an opportunity of quality public education for every boy and girl in the state of Louisiana. Equity of opportunity. We believe that we have a promise to send a school bus to pick a child up. A promise to bring them into a classroom and have a qualified teacher in that classroom. A promise to provide them with a textbook and the materials and supplies that they need. A promise to give them a lunch. And a promise to have a school bus driver that's going to return them home. And anything that challenges that tries to detract from that, you're going to find us up front this organization will be up front. And that's what we saw here. You're gonna get you're gonna get our challenge. And more than that, we know as an organization that represents teachers and school employees that we have an obligation to ensure that we keep those good quality employees in our classrooms, that they're not disrespected. Such as whenever I stood before at the state capitol and looked out there of that sea of mostly women that were so disrespected at the state capitol, that were locked out of the state capitol, that were herded through the state capitol and frisked like common criminals to get in there. That was the most offensive day in my entire tenure of doing this job. So I believe that we have an opportunity to come back and to right some of those wrongs. Through this process, we have worked hard as a local organization to try to navigate and to mitigate. To listen to the teacher that sends kids to Harvard and to Yale, but you received an ineffective because her gifted and talented children didn't score quite good enough on this arbitrary made-up scale. To listen to teachers that were evaluated on wrong job descriptions. We have been part of that. And part of what we've done too is to recognize that, that we have young mothers and fathers that are part of our organization to make sure that they are able to provide for their children by having a place for them, first of all, for the mothers to be able to have a special place for lactation, so that our young mothers are not invited to not teach anymore. We also have another bill that we have that will be a parental leave. Mm-hmm. One of the most harmful things that happened last year is the way we handle maternity leave, actually excluding support employees out of that, where we allowed the parents to, whether it be a mother or father, to have 7 additional days within a calendar year for them to be able to take their child to the doctor, so they wouldn't have to go into a no-pay status and break their service. So that's what we've done here locally, but really what it comes down to is our charge is every single day is to stand up and meet the challenge for those who are out there that are doing everything in their power to dismantle, to take away the promise of a quality public education for the boys and girls in the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. Any questions about anything?
I'd like to ask questions, but
Please.
it would be like that whole me and you one-on-one. Would I love to talk to you guys off?
Or however y'all want to do it.
Yeah.
We can do it separate after.